Hello and welcome, everyone. There's just a couple people in the room right now, but I expect we'll get a few more as we go. Thank you for joining us today for this Microsoft Reactor live stream event. My name's Rebecca, and I'm the event planner for the Microsoft Reactor New York. Before we begin, I'd like to just quickly go through a couple of slides, some housekeeping items. So our code of conduct, Microsoft Reactor seeks to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and our presenters. We encourage engagement, but we just ask that you're mindful, keep your commentary professional and on topic. You're more than welcome to drop messages into the chat, or once we're kind of in a discussion, you can also unmute and weigh in directly with our speakers. This is an open forum. So if you are joining us for the first time, we do record these sessions. They are posted to YouTube afterwards for on-demand access. So in this case, because it's a Teams meeting, if you want to stay kind of off the recording, just make sure that you keep your cameras off. And then also, as I mentioned, if you have questions, you can submit them in the chat. You're more than welcome to unmute and discuss openly with us. There should also be closed captioning if you need that. It's on the 3 dots on your settings. You should be able to click that and turn that on. Right, so today's session, this is the main event. We'll be discussing security updates that were released recently and featured at Microsoft Ignite. There was a lot of exciting topics covered with many kind of developments in the works, but today we're specifically focusing on Azure Security Stack. We are joined by Bill Wilder and Marcos Nogueira to discuss that and let us know some of their key takeaways and the hot takes on those topics and what they thought about them. We are also joined by a special guest, Microsoft Learn student ambassador, Rusha Yagnet. Please just make sure your mic is muted. Go. If you're joining us, just make sure that your mics are muted. This is an open discussion. This is a table topic. So the way that this session will flow is our speakers will discuss primary topics mentioned at Ignite on security, but it's also meant to be engaging for you all that are tuning in. So feel free to interact and I'll let them take it from there. Thank you guys for tuning in. More than welcome to unmute yourselves, Bill, Marcos. Let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning. As you can see over here on the time, my name is Marcos Nogueira. I'm an Azure MVP for a couple of years now, almost like 8 years, 7 years. And with me, I have Bill. Hello, Bill.
Hey, Marcos. Hi, everybody.
Very nice. So let's start this. I'm assuming that everyone been or saw the Ignite event. And I just want to start this with some of those topics that we want to make sure that everyone is available. One of them that I particularly like in this case was the way that, first of all, Microsoft changed the name of the entire security stack to everything that was before, even Security Center, even Azure Defender to the Microsoft Defender for Cloud. I want to start with that. And again, me and Bill and Rucha, if you guys have any questions that you are an audience, please come out of the mute and ask us, because this is your opportunity to have 2 MVPs, Azure MVPs and a student ambassador to answer any of questions. I just want to launch a topic that is the new name. What do you think about that, Bill?
Hi, yeah, thanks, Marcos, and welcome, everybody. The new name is not Microsoft Marketing Gone Wild to randomly changing the branding, but let me give a little very brief background. In 2008, when Azure was announced, it was announced as Windows Azure. And then in 2014, about 6 years later, they changed the branding from Windows Azure to Microsoft Azure. And that reflected the fact that the earlier platform, the earlier days of the platform, it was supporting Windows workloads only and a small number of services, but it evolved to also support Linux. And if you have a service that's just an API, is that Windows really? It doesn't, it's not really associated with Windows. So they generalized the platform for the first time in 2014. Now we're going 7 years later to 2021, and there's some additional rebranding, as Marcos alluded to. And this one is focused around the security features. There are two general sets, you might say, of security features that are kind of overarch the platform. One you can think of as posture management, which is, it's called posture management, which is the configuration of your services. And that's, does your virtual machine have disk encryption enabled? You might not want to deploy, sensitive workloads that don't have that. Do you have SSL enabled everywhere? Do you have, are your virtual machines patched? Do you have endpoint protection turned on everywhere, etc.? There's all the things that are configuration based. That's posture management. That's one kind of security function. And another one you can think about is threat protection. And the Microsoft Defender family there, or previously Azure Defender, was focused on that. So somebody trying to brute force into your SQL database because it's on the public internet, or attacking your virtual machine, or is somebody exploiting your SQL database through a SQL injection attack, etc. These are all active threats that kind of alert based. And the rebranding in the platform combines what used to be known as Azure Security Center and what used to be known as Azure Defender, and sometimes Azure Defender for SQL DB or AKS and so forth, sub-branded ones for specific services. And those have all been changed to have the Microsoft brand in front instead of Azure. So Azure is no longer in that branding, and the security features that used to be Azure Security Center, when you go there in the portal, that's now all the stuff in there is now called Microsoft Defender for Cloud. And they combined that observation with some of the specific upgrades that were announced in the Ignite timeframe, such as more integration between services within the security services in Azure. For example, Sentinel and which is the SIEM, and posture management and Defender are all like talking a little more closely. That's one observation. And the other big one is that, and this is the key one here, is that Microsoft has also extended the platform further outside of Azure itself. It's no longer, it wasn't strictly Azure, but they've taken more ground outside of Azure. They've got Mac announcements, AWS announcements, private and on-prem data center announcements, where all your signals can now be concentrated back through posture management and threat protection into Azure itself. And the bottom line is Microsoft is signaling that they're increasingly making it possible for the Azure security features to be the single pane of glass for you to run your enterprise from a security perspective.
Yeah, the part that I like about this name is like you mentioned, and like you allure, is the Defender for the cloud. So it's no longer the Azure Defender. So it's no longer using the native tools that you have to only protect your Azure. It protects, in this case, more than that. That's why they are on all of these efforts to doing that, because like you mentioned, the CSPM, or the Cloud Security Posture Management, for example, on AWS, it connects directly to the security center of AWS, that is the security hub, right? Directly to there to pull those signals. So I think it's really smart for Microsoft to create a kind of a way that you can have your security stack no matter where your workload is running. Associated with that you have already with all of the um, Azure Arc, in this case, features enabling and be able to do that, you are extending that to on-premises as well. So the Defender right now, the Microsoft Defender, let's call it this way, it goes behind just single point, like endpoint. It goes to transverse to the entire platform. The cloud as a whole, not only Azure, the cloud like AWS and all of those cloud partners or cloud providers to on-prem to your endpoint. And in this case, like you mentioned, Bill, doesn't matter which endpoint are we talking about. Even if it's Windows, even if it's iOS, Mac, Android, it doesn't matter. It truly protects the end-to-end with all of the things that we have it. But the part that I like about this posture management is, if I may interlude in this, is we have basically two ways, right? We have the cloud security posture management that you described really well, but we have other one that is more like the cloud workload protection. So the cloud workload protection, it's basically using the Microsoft threat intelligence that you will have a lot of protection that you can have it. You have the Azure native ones that probably everyone knows or are familiar. For example, from the Azure PaaS services, that you have the cloud app security, that you have the WAFs and all of that, to the Azure data service, like you mentioned, with SQL, with Azure SQL and storage services and all of those, through the networks with the announcement that they recently did with the Azure Firewall Premium, the next gen of firewall that you guys have it. I highly recommend you guys to go to the book of news that Rebecca really well posted on the chat to just double check what is being offering or what has been announced on these Ignite. I know that it's been a couple of weeks, but a lot of good information is there and a lot of things that you can hide it, right?
Right on. And I'll add that while this name change and a bunch of the announcements signal this drive to make Azure Security or Microsoft Defender for Cloud and Microsoft Defender product line your one pane of glass, that the announcements were not complete, right? In the sense that there's more progress that's already been made, say, on AWS than on GCP, it appears. So this is, I would say, a work in progress, but they've made pretty good inroads, and enough has been released to warrant the name change. So it's an interesting development.
And be able to open this to other platforms besides Azure, I think it shows how commitment Microsoft is with the security stack, because it's one of the few, at least from my knowledge, one of the few that I know out there that they are keen to protect your infrastructure, because multi-cloud, it's present in a lot of organizations taking the advantage of the public cloud providers with your hybrids. Is your way, it's what I see in a lot of organizations moving forward, and be able to protect that with the Microsoft Security Stack, in this case the Azure Security Stack, powered by the Microsoft Azure Cloud. It's really important to have all of those, and especially you guys that probably are already working with some of those components. like you mentioned, Bill, Sentinel, and a lot of other ones that you receive signals as a SIM tool. You probably see this, but you probably didn't know that, for example, and that's a question for you, Bill, without putting on a spot, is like on the cloud security posture management, like you mentioned, be able to have the guidance of the Azure Security Benchmark to be able to get all of those good information, right? What do you think about talking a little bit more about the security posture management? How you think that that is going to influence organizations to leverage even more this Azure Security Stack?
Yes. So Microsoft Azure has a fundamental feature called Azure Policy. And Azure Policy is a part of the platform that allows you to either know about or control the configuration of your environment. And one of the uses of Azure Policy is done by what's now known as Microsoft Defender for Cloud, which is used for posture management. So it's underlying it is Azure Policy. And they've done some good work in Azure Policy and Azure Defender, Microsoft Defender for Cloud. I have to get used to the new name. For posture management, we actually released a new set of compliance standards that are based on the trying to remember the name here. I'm glancing to see if it's here. The Microsoft security. There's an Azure like benchmark. They've released a version 3 of that. I'm trying to look for the exact name, but I don't have it at hand. Which is a new, an enhanced version of the posture management. So you can measure yourself against a benchmark like that, the Azure Security Benchmark, or other things like ISO 27001 and so forth. There's a whole bunch of those in the portal. So they're still investing in that part. And the key here is at scale, you can automate meaningful aspects of your posture management. It's a really hard job to get right. It's hard to keep your workloads from drifting in their configuration unless you have enterprise scale tools that help you keep an eye on it and constrain it. So yeah, work continues, and they have new releases around that as just described, new functionality.
Yeah, totally. And that's the part that I like, in my opinion. It's the part that through, for example, the secure score that gives you a guidance of how are you protected and how is your basically resources configured, and how is your configuration running against the security benchmark, and with a simple click of a button to be able to see how compliant are you with those policies, like for example NIST, even Azure the CIS, the cloud infrastructure security, I think is the name, or the cloud internet security. So be able to do that, and be able to see how is those regulated environments are compliant against that. So for example, used to be a nightmare if you want to see if your environment is a SOC 2 compliant. And right now, with almost a click of a button through the Azure Secure Score, you know what is not being compliant, and you can even the part that I love about that is you can even basically, for example, export that report and send to the auditors. So it makes your life easier. And if you are not there yet, you can see what are the options. Very, very nice to see that by a click of a button, for example, you are able to go on that path. But this is all ongoing information, that all ongoing things that going on Azure, right? As a fast involvement, as the best example for CI/CD. So they are completely always improving the Azure, especially on the security part, and a lot of good announcements.
And I'll summarize that by looking at the survey, which suggests that this cross-cloud view of your security posture and threat protection is something that's important to a lot of people. We're probably in a multi-cloud world in every large organization probably, and but for every organization, there's not just clouds and sometimes multiple clouds, but also devices. There were announcements on very specific things like iOS support for endpoints and endpoint protection, and Mac. Now it supports like Windows, Linux, Mac, iOS, and Android, the whole suite. So you can bring all your signals in one pane of glass, because most security attacks start somewhere. And if they start on a device, like your laptop is compromised, say through a phishing attack, and then they move laterally through the system, that the Microsoft Defender suite now has enough information to help through the MITRE attack framework to even help guide you through where what stage of the attack these signals are suggesting the attacker is at. So it's a pretty comprehensive look at things.
It is. And the part that I like that I forgot to mention is it goes behind all of those normal devices and enters into the IoT world, because now the Defender, it embraced the IoT deeply integrated with Sentinel, with the Defender as well. And now you can basically even export or support third-party tools, like, for example, the IBM Q Radar, Splunk, and even ServiceNow. So it's pretty powerful to just having the entire part that you have on your solution, from a simple sensor that you have on a factory to the endpoint that you are consuming those. Now you are fully protected and truly an end-to-end solution. But we've been talking too much, and that's what happened with a lot of with MVPs are together, and we didn't allow anyone to have any questions. Does anyone on audience have a question?
We did get one
from
the audience. And Richard, did you have something?
Yeah, so as a student, thanks for bringing this up, Marcos. From a student perspective, whenever we are asked by our professors to build up projects in computer science domain or even hackathons nowadays, IoT or operational technology devices based projects are the most looked after projects. What I want to learn from both Bill, you and Marcos is that of course, we all know that IoT devices are notoriously difficult to secure because they're often unpatched and unmonitored, making them the most attractive targets for attackers who are looking to infiltrate corporate networks. How do you think Microsoft Defender for IoT services now secure IoT devices?
Well, I could start by echoing something that Marcos already mentioned, which is that it's been extended to support industrial control system devices, for example, in a factory. So that's a whole category of devices that was not covered by this technology until very recently. And it was an industrial control. Every now and then you hear about an industrial control system breach that is pretty serious, because usually they control the physical world, right? They control machines in a factory. And I believe the Natanz Stuxnet attack in Iran was an industrial control device compromise. But another common one is probably voice over IP VoIP phones. I did also notice that vector has been addressed also in this release, because they announced support for a number of those. So one way to answer your question, Rucha, is that they've extended the reach to cover more kinds of devices, which is probably an endless game. There's always going to be another device, but they're moving the needle.
I see. Thanks. That is interesting.
It is. It is the part that right now, just to add what Bill said, is you've been kind of having the big brother watching you in all over the place, right? It's not only because if you're looking at the news, even the past news, IoT devices, because they are such as small footprint, right, regarding deployment and all of that, usually we starting deploying with not with the mindset of security and be able to using the wrong protocol, for example, and on a weaker protocol, we are starting to open up, and because they are connected to our in this case network, depending on how you are configuring those IoT devices, it's an entry point. Be able to secure that with the Defender and be able to do that with agentless. That's the part that I think it's important to notice that part. With the Defender for IT that changed the name, it used to be Azure Defender for IoT, and now it's the Microsoft Defender for IoT, right? You are able to capture those and to stop that. So basically that will increase in a lot of solutions that you need to secure, and you need to have those industrial control systems, the ICS. You'll be able to, from manufacturers, from oil and gas, that's where I'm coming from, the majority of my experience, and energy sector is where you're starting to get those attacks being reduced by with the Defender. At least I'm not saying that you are stopping those. You are reducing those attacks to happen or to proliferate into your network, because you are quicker to intervene and you are quicker to get those actions after you get the attack happen, right?
Awesome.
So given, I'm looking at the clock, there's only a few minutes left, and there are 3 questions. One I can answer, which is, does Azure have a native SIEM? And they do. It's called Sentinel, Microsoft Sentinel. Recently it was Azure Sentinel. And that's the SIEM tool that's integrating tightly with the other tools, tools in the Microsoft Defender tool set. So that works with posture management, threat intelligence, and so forth. And then there are 2 other questions I don't actually have the answer to. I don't know if the server endpoint remediation through Azure Arc has been fully integrated into Defender for Cloud, I'm afraid. And security score, the secure score, I think it's literally called in Microsoft Defender for Cloud, is that specific to a compliance standard?
It is the Azure Security Benchmark. What they are comparing, so the security score, it's not because you have like, let's say 37%, and I'm just making it up, that you are not secure. It means that comparing what you have configured at that present moment with Azure Security Benchmark, you are 37% compliant or using those benchmarks. And that allows you to know what you need to do it if you want to fully integrate or fully, in this case, configure those benchmarks. But benchmarks are nothing more than guidelines, okay? So it's basically the best practice that Microsoft is telling you regarding your infrastructure, but sometimes it's not applicable. I'll give you an example. If you have an open port that is, for example, if you are using SQL and the default port is the 1433, but you are using the 5897 because you want to do that, it will show you that that port is open, the 5897, but then you can just basically suppress that, and you will be, it's your configuration, okay? For Microsoft says that is not possible to have, or it's not recommended to have that port open, but it's your possibility, right?
Thanks, Marcos.
So another
I can field another. Yeah, so the native drift, that's the whole posture management discussion, and Azure has great tools for this.
Yes.
And those are in Microsoft Defender for Cloud, and you can use the secure score like Marcos was just talking about, and identify them, and even right in the portal correct them. You can also put constraints on them with Azure Policy to prevent drift. You want to handle any of the others, Marcos? The compliance.
There is
metrics?
another one asking: do these compliance metrics have a layer 7 visibility? Can you elaborate a little bit more about that? You're talking about network, in this case, network inspection, because if you are talking about that, yes, with Azure Firewall Premium, it's what it is, the next gen. You will have IDPS, so intrusion detection prevention system, that you can enable, and even associate that with the threat availability or the threat management that you already have at Microsoft, and usually all the power of the AI and all of that to be able to evaluate if you are being hacked or not. If you are referring to that, yes.
Yeah, there are also WAFs, right? I don't know if the one you're talking about, the new version, Marcos, includes a WAF, but there are separate WAF offerings as well that are application level.
Yeah.
Layer 7 level.
Okay, so Dave in this case is saying the SSL, MITM, and detects credit cards details based on regress. Yeah, basically all of that. You can even, the good thing about this is because this goes behind the cloud, and we've totally forgot that this Microsoft Defender goes behind only the cloud. It goes to the Office 365 as well, or should we say the Microsoft 365. So if you have all of those rules in place, basically regarding DLP and all of that information is going to be catch in the middle. That's the beauty of all of this solution. But yeah, as usual, we already run out of time. I apologize, Rebecca, but MVPs together, the time for us flies.
No worries, it's fine. I think a few minutes past means a sign of a good session. I mean, we tried to pack a lot into a little. So
Yes.
30 minutes is not nearly enough when we're talking about large changes happening across the network. So thank you both so much. Feel free, if anybody out there, if we answered your question, if we didn't answer your question, if you want to elaborate, we still probably have like another minute or two that you can drop it while I do one last little shtick related to the Microsoft Reactor. So Bill, Marcos, Rucha, thank you so much. If you just want to hang tight for just a second, I will quickly just go through this here. So if you're not familiar with the Microsoft Reactor program, we offer free content to our community. So we're always putting out new things. If you are tuning in for the first time, if you heard about us at random, definitely check out microsoftreactor.com. We have our calendar of events there on a weekly basis. We are running all different topics, including security workshops. So feel free to go over, check out the calendar, search by topic, and become a part of this wonderful community that we're growing. I dropped a bunch of links into the chat, including information about Microsoft MVPs, which Marcos and Bill are a part of that program. Lots of contributions from them. And then also about the Student Ambassador Program. Rucha, if there's anything that you wanted to say about it, any plugs or anything? I'm putting you on the spot, but you don't have to.
Sure. So me being Microsoft Student Ambassador can vouch for this program because as a community, as a part of the community, there are a lot of scopes where you can grow together and learn from your peers. So anyone who's looking out to grow their own skill sets and also uplifting the community in sharing technical skills and Microsoft products with them, do join this community. We are all a part of this big family and happy to learn and grow together.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So at this time, I think I will circle back. Do either of you have maybe some knowledge or some direction that you can send Andrew in? He had asked a question about endpoint remediation. So I know we weren't able to answer that here, but if there was some resource or something that you could direct them to. If not, no big deal. Just thought I'd try to make sure we're answering
Sorry,
everybody
what
if we
was the
can.
question?
Andrew had asked, has his experience with server endpoint remediation through Azure Arc been fully integrated into Defender for Cloud Incident Dashboard? Very specific.
On top of my head, I don't know if that is being added to the at this present moment, especially with the Azure Arc on the incident dashboard. But if it's not there yet, I'm sure that Andrew, it will be very, very soon. I don't have on top. I had to research, to be very honest, if I have it. Usually, I'm more on the cloud version, building this for the cloud, than with Azure Arc, I have to say. But I'm sure that is going to be there if it's not there again very soon.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Marcos. So again, thank you all for tuning in. I know a number of you have dropped off, but thanks to the last few for sticking around to the very end. We appreciate you. I hope this conversation was constructive and helpful on your end. Again, if you haven't checked out Microsoft Ignite sessions, or if you've only seen a few, definitely lots of exciting things. So look at the book of news. Bill, Marcos, Rusha, thank you so much for being a part of today's session.
Very welcome. It was my pleasure.
And everybody else,
Pleasure
take
is
care
ours.
now.
Thank you.